The 64-byte transaction bug. A hidden flaw in Bitcoin's Merkle tree, addressed by BIP54 as part of the consensus cleanup proposal. Every Bitcoin block bundles its transactions into a structure called a Merkle tree. Transactions sit at the bottom as leaves, and each pair gets hashed together to form a parent, all the way up to a single root hash. To prove your transaction is in a block, you don't need the whole tree. You just need the sibling hashes at each level. Hash your way up. If you land on the same root that's in the block header, the proof checks out. Now let's look inside one of these parent nodes. To compute it, you concatenate two child hashes, each one is 32 bytes, and feed the result into SHA-256. So the input to every inner node is exactly 64 bytes. Here's where it gets interesting. A Bitcoin transaction can be crafted to be exactly 64 bytes. One input, one output, minimal script data. The smallest possible transaction is actually around 61 bytes, but 64 is the critical number because it matches the inner node size. Stack them side by side. Inner node, 64 bytes. Transaction, 64 bytes. SHA-256 sees the same number of bytes either way. It has no idea whether it's hashing a Merkle node or a transaction. That ambiguity is the bug. Why does this matter? Because light wallets, also called SPV wallets, don't download every block. They only grab block headers and ask full nodes for Merkle proofs. If the proof hashes to the root in the header, they trust it. They never see the full tree. Here's how the attack works. Alice needs two transactions. The first one is the real transaction, a malicious 64-byte transaction that actually gets mined. Its first 32 bytes will be read as a left child hash, and its last 32 bytes as a right child hash. The second transaction is the fake one, a normal-looking payment, say 5 BTC to Bob. This one never gets mined. But its transaction ID, the hash of that payment, must exactly match those last 32 bytes of the real transaction. So how does Alice make the transaction IDs match? She grinds. She creates her fake transaction, then keeps changing the change address, over and over, and each time the transaction ID changes. Most attempts won't match, but with the constraints on the last 32 bytes, there are about 70 bits of work to brute force. That's far less than 2 to the 256, but still expensive. Step 1. Alice broadcasts her 64-byte transaction. It looks weird, but it's technically valid, so miners include it in a block. It lands in the Merkle tree as a leaf. Let's call it transaction 64. Step 2. Here's the key insight. That leaf, transaction 64, is 64 bytes long. When the Merkle tree hashes it, SHA-256 sees 64 bytes and treats the first 32 as one child hash and the last 32 as another. The leaf splits open into two fake children. The tree now has an extra level that was never meant to exist, and one of those fake children is the transaction ID of Alice's never-mined payment. So now there are two ways to read the same Merkle tree. In reality, it's a normal tree with transaction 64 as a leaf, but Alice can construct a Merkle proof that treats it as an inner node with two children, one of which is her fake 5 BTC payment. Both interpretations produce the exact same root hash. That's the whole trick. Step 3. Alice sends this fake proof to Bob's Light wallet. The wallet checks. Does the leaf hash to the parent? Yes. Does the path reach the root? Yes. Does the root match the block header? Yes, because it's a real block, mined by real miners with real proof of work. Every check passes. Bob's wallet shows an incoming payment of 5 BTC, but that transaction was never mined. It doesn't exist. Now, you might ask, how feasible is this really? Let's break down the last 32 bytes, field by field. Out of those 32 bytes, about 8 bytes are constrained. The tail of the transaction ID, the signature size, the output count, and the script size. The other 24 bytes are either freely chosen or directly manipulable by the attacker. That leaves about 70 bits of work, far from the 2 to the 256 you'd need for a full SHA-256 collision, but still costly enough to require serious resources. The fix? Beautifully simple. BIP54 says, ban all 64-byte transactions. Nothing breaks. This is part of the consensus cleanup soft fork. Follow at Bitcoin Devs for more. Next up, worst case block validation time.